A warm and pleasant morning to all. This webinar is initiated by Prime Talent Limited. It was incorporated in the year 2016 in the heart of London to address the growing challenges in the talent supply chain, to create a strong pipeline of talent, to ensure that our workplace, our workforce has the right skills for the current and future industrial cycles. Hope you all are having a good day. Let's make it better by getting an insight about digital transformation in UK workplace learning. I am Ekta Gupta, behavioral skills trainer for Prime Talent UK, and today's host. With the entire globe going digital, digital technology has been transforming workplaces and learning and development sector. This transformation has the capacity to propel the evolution of workplace learning by implementing modern technologies and solutions to enhance the experiences for all. Let us explore more with Mr. Graham Hill, who is currently the head of learning at Thames Water UK. He has an impressive experience of over 25 years in the learning and development and business improvement industries. Good morning, Graham.
Morning, Ekta. How are you?
All well, thank you. Hope you're doing well too.
Absolutely, yeah, very good.
So we appreciate your presence and look forward to be cognizant of a digital transformation. But foremost, kindly enlighten us more about yourself, please.
Yeah, varied experience. Started life many moons ago as a tradesman doing joinery. Went back to college, did a degree around sport. Went back into a trade and gradually worked for a company where they were going through continuous improvement. I started doing the training and facilitating around that, and there started my career in learning and development. And since then, I've developed into roles in construction as learning manager. I worked for myself for 9 years, training and consulting around continuous improvement and leadership and management. And really my last sort of 10 years have been taken up working in the sort of risk industry, well, the high risk industry of oil and gas, and more recently Thames Water. So very much working with people around safety, compliance, conformance, and how learning supports that structure.
Thank you. So to begin with, I would ask you the first question as like, how do you define digital transformation in the context of workplace learning?
Yeah, so I mean, from my perspective, and coming back to my CI background, the real question is, what's the problem we're trying to solve, and really understand the problem, and then we can understand where digital transformation really adds to that. So a lot of work we've done in the environment I'm in now is really starting to understand what the problem we're trying to solve is. So working with the people in the business and understanding the definition between knowledge, skills and behaviours. Because when we start to understand those, we can then understand where digital and traditional practice, face-to-face, etc., can actually start to help us solve the problem. So the first thing we really do is try and focus on performance, not on just throwing learning solutions at something. So understand what the performance is we're trying to change. Understand what people need to know in order to change that performance, and then what skills they need to develop, and then the behaviours they need to demonstrate. And we often shy away from the behaviours bit, but in most scenarios where you work in a risk world, most incident investigations will tell you that it comes down to a behaviour in the end that culminated to cause an incident. So then we're starting to look at, well, where digital can really change that. So most businesses are under pressure. We're trying to be efficient. So digital can really support when we look at the knowledge piece, and we can pass knowledge on to people quite easily through digital, whether that be documentation, videos, e-learning, etc. And it's a really good way of making sure that the time we spend with people, where we do need to take them out of the workplace or move them to a different venue, it's really adding value. And then when it comes to skills, there are opportunities there. We're starting now to use VR simulations And it doesn't necessarily have to be completely separate. In the classroom, we're using VR to actually start taking people into environments to give them that experience. So it can very easily cross over and work together and support different ways of learning. And really the idea of the simulation is, you know, I've worked in environments where we've used digital to actually create communication, cohorts talking to each other, being supported by coaches. So there's a whole raft of digital solutions. And I think the question really is where can digital really add the value to the performance problem? Where, you know, if we're looking for the solution to the problem, where does digital contribute to that? Don't necessarily think it is the standalone solution, neither is face-to-face or otherwise, but it's part of the solution and it can be a really strong part of that solution.
Sounds fascinating. Talking about the role of digital technologies in the workplace learning, how can digital transformation help UK organizations to adapt and respond to change more quickly and effectively?
Yeah, okay. Well, I've thought about this question and I think there's a really, really simple answer, is that to me, a lot of this is about visibility. And again, if I go back to my lean continuous improvement background, we used to use a statement that was regularly used in the Japanese environment as, if you can see the problem, you can manage it. It staggers me within industry as a whole how often managers, leaders are making decisions on instinct and opinion rather than actually on hard data and actually the facts that are in front of them. And that's for a whole raft of reasons. Recently read Thinking Faster and Slower, and it talks about how people react and use instinct, etc., to make decisions. But actually, do we take the time to use the correct data to really understand the problem we're trying to solve, understand what's going to actually make a difference, whether that's through playing through simulations, etc. So to me, one of the core things is, where can we use data to really help us understand what's working, what's not working? If we're implementing a learning solution, is that having the impact we're after? We've used artificial intelligence to really understand whether the learner's getting a better understanding of the subject through the language they're using. So there's some quite clever technology out there now that it's not a tick sheet anymore. We're not just asking, did you enjoy it? This is really starting to understand if the terminology and the language people are using is adapting and changing. So visibility is one. Key is also agility with a small a. So can we change quickly? And in my experience, that's about the whole, you know, it's the whole systems thinking part. It's not just about how we design, it's the systems we put the design on. Is it accessible to people, etc. So good design might mean that we're not curating all the time. We're not creating all the time, we're curating. Building a library, what I often describe as a pantry. And if the performance issue is your recipe, you need a solution to a performance issue, then you go into the pantry and you pick your different ingredients for that particular situation. You might go back to the same pantry and pick a large proportion of the same ingredients, the same learning solutions, but with slight variations. And that, again, like a normal recipe, can come out with completely different outcomes. So it's, you know, using digital to understand the problem and then having a design in place or a quick way of being able to deal with the solution through this pantry of ideas. So it's really getting a grip with what can we do, what's the core things that relate across the board, and then if we do need to curate, how can we do that quickly? Systems like video and things like that, we can really get some engaging video that can really create the gap of that technical requirement for that particular issue or problem. So it's really what's the very fine bit that we need to do to curate, and what's the general part that we can get across in other ways. But then on top of that, it's got to be accessible. So we've got to make sure that the audience to which we're presenting to has got access to that. And in my current environment, we have people out working, you know, across the whole London region, out in vans. We've got people on sites. We've got, people sat in offices. Got to be very careful. We're not just designing for people with a PC sat in front of them, but is it accessible? We use a product like a Tough Book, where the guys out in the streets have digital tablets, and we're going to make sure that it's all accessible and available through those sorts of technologies as well. And then we tap into the really simple stuff, which is toolbox talks, touch points with their managers and supervisors, and how can we provide them with at the point of use solutions. So it's, where can we really start to make these things hit home? When I was in BP, we were then talking about using QR codes, where people were using works instructions and permits to work that were linked to the QR codes. So we could then give on the spot little glimpses, little snippets of information and learning at the point of use. So again, little nudges, little reminders to make sure it's kept live and relevant. So I think agility and being able to change quickly and be able to adapt to the environment we're in. We all took a harsh lesson in that 2 or 3 years ago as COVID hit. We had to change very quickly. But also that visibility allows us to change quickly because we can make logical decisions rather than reactive decisions.
Quite a transformation, I would say. This brings me to my next question, though. Could you please provide some examples of how UK organizations are using digital transformation to support their organizational agility?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So in my world, that transformation agility again is about the design. It's about the process, making sure that things are accessible to people at the point when they need it. So we're using things like technology to track people. So we create logs of experience and logbooks. So we're being able to, from an agile world, rather than historically we would put people on training. So for example, we use a course called Confined Space Entry. We regularly have to check those people have still got the skills and the ability. Historically, what we've done is refresh at a regular basis, and we do that on a whole range of compliance courses. What we're now doing is, as well as just waiting for the refresher 2, 3 years, 5 years down the line, we're now using technology to track when they go into confined spaces. So we have logbooks of their experience. Any notes are captured on the back of that to see if there was any issues or any problems. So we've got almost live data to tell us how people are performing. Within that, we can then start pumping out knowledge checks on a regular basis, and we're starting to use tech to really identify when the competencies and capabilities are starting to drop. So in relation to being agile, we're measuring people's capability at the point of use, and then we're looking to close those gaps of any gaps in the knowledge at the point of use. So historically, we may have waited 3 years to actually put somebody through a refresher. We're now identifying where there's gaps in it, and that makes us more agile. It makes us more able to use the people in the field. Historically, we would have had a risk because their competency are dropping. We don't get that, or we reduce that now by dealing with it at the point of use, which means as a business, we've got our people capable and competent when we actually need them, hence being more agile.
It certainly sheds some light on understanding its impact. Please do share some examples of how UK organizations are using digital transformation to promote diversity and inclusion in their workplace learning programs.
Yeah, I mean, we are Thames Water promote diversity and inclusion. We're a very inclusive business. We work in an environment where our customer base is very diverse. I think we service about a quarter to a third of the UK population just in the London area alone. So we have London and Thames Valley. So in relation to diversity, some of that comes around how we deliver and design learning. So obviously we work to design standards. That includes things like transcripts, subtitles, voiceovers to deal with anybody that's got any disabilities or restrictions. But then the other side of that is we recognise diversity within the design as well. So we ensure that all our design includes diverse images and people across the board. I think the other side of it as well is a lot of the training we actually do. So some of the training we do face to face, the trainers are all prepared and they've been trained to recognise when there's people with learning difficulties or diverse environments and how they adapt to those. And then the business supports those with additional learning and additional support, including, you know, reading, writing. So we have a huge range of employees from, you know, some of our guys are cleaning sewers, they're working on sewerage sites. They're not historically academic, but we still support them and make sure that we give them all the support they need to know what they need to know. So from that perspective, we operate from a learning team as diverse as, you know, we try and make it as diverse and inclusive as possible.
That's pretty encouraging. However, maybe know how is digital transformation changing the role of the learning and development professionals in the UK?
Yeah, and I think I remember reading something about this a few years ago, and we're talking about, you know, learning needed to be more consultative into the business. It needs to be working with the business closer. And I think over the last sort of 5-10 years, we've definitely seen that change from a function that's literally just sending people on courses and booking people onto training, etc. One of the things I've done in this role and previous roles is brought learning consultants into the team. And I think historically 10 years ago that wouldn't have been so, you know, so obvious. I even put, you know, we had learning consultants working with the designers. I currently have learning consultants that work with the business, so each learning consultant represents a different part of the business. They're getting very close to those parts of the business, understanding their needs. There is a piece around not just us understanding the problem we're trying to solve, it's often the actual stakeholders understanding the problem they're trying to solve. I remember, for example, when I first started, I had somebody come to me and say, I need a 2-week course for my employees. And I said, well, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And his answer was, I don't know, but I know we need a 2-week course. And it's like, we're really sort of digging into, we've got to deliver efficiently, but effectively as well. And we're not going to be effective if all we do is deal with the symptoms. We've really got to dig down and understand. And there's, you know, there's a lot of conversation around performance consultancy and the actor and the stage, and, you know, how much of this sits with the individual, the actor, and how much is the environment around them. And I think as a learning function, we've got to appreciate that it's both, and in most environments it is. But how do we as a service try and support what the business is trying to do? So we've got to be a service to the business, not a function that just dishes out. So getting close to the business, understanding their challenges. We have an issue, as most people probably do, with fill rates. So when we have done face-to-face, we get, or even attendance on digital, we're not getting the people we need through, or we're booking courses and we don't have full groups. There's various historical ways of doing that, whether you've, you know, penalise or fine that part of the business, but then we're just moving money around the business. It isn't really logical. Our learning consultants are trying to work closer with the business, the way we book, the way we plan, the way we develop, and how can we work closer to understand their requirements. We're using digital and data now to help us see when people are coming out of compliance and being able to go to them and offer them opportunities to book on courses leading up to that. We can see when there's peaks and troughs in the business, because I think, like most businesses, they'll have done a raft of training at some point historically. So you always see that cycle of 2 or 3 years coming round. So you'll get another group of people. So we try and plan with the business where that sits, because because of the nature of our business, certain parts of the business are really busy in summer, certain parts of the business can be really busy in winter. So you've got to look at that seasonal effect. How can we pull and adjust the training so that we're not taking people off site at the busiest times of the year? Because we know we aren't going to win that battle. If there's a business need for them to be there, the business operations will always win. So we've got to provide a service and work with them and understand their needs, understand the problems and how we can best get that problem solved. So the role of a learning team now is very much getting into the part of the business they're working with and understanding the needs of that business. And then how can we as learning experts, and I think, you know, that's one of our challenges, is that everybody's a learning expert because they've been on a course. It's understanding how we can really help them see what's going to change the performance and see how that fits into the bigger part of the solution. So it's not just about sending them on a course, it's everything that goes around it to change mindsets, to change culture, etc.
Now we understand more. The influence is such transformation. But then it raises the question about the biggest challenges organizations in the UK are facing in implementing digital transformation in workplace learning programs.
Yeah. So I think that there's various points, and I've touched on one then. I think historically, the training team's been seen as book this, order that, you know, we need this solution, etc., etc. I think it's recognizing and getting recognition from the wider business that actually learning consultants and learning trainers, etc., are experts in their field and they've got experience and knowledge around how to best deliver a solution. So, you know, one of the challenges with going digital is if it's driven by the business, as Ford came up with the faster horses. If they ever asked anybody what they wanted, nobody said we wanted a car. They always said we want faster horses. And it's similar in our world, is that if people don't understand digital or they haven't seen the benefit, etc., etc., it's not a choice they're going to make. And that's where the learning consultancy comes in, of actually saying, well, is this the best solution for this situation? If it's knowledge, is there a digital way we can produce it without actually impeding on people coming off site or restricting their work? So I think there's some recognition that learning is actually an industry, a trade, knowledgeable people. And when we have experienced that, and it's often, we tend to find it's on the second or third cycle round with part of the business or a stakeholder in designing a solution, that they actually start to say, yeah, this isn't what I'd have done, but I actually see the benefit in it now. So there's that challenge. I think budgets are always going to be a challenge. Largely depends where you sit in an organisation and what you're competing with. I've sat in various organisations in various positions. So within BP, I sat in a safety and operational risk team that was very safety orientated. In an academy. In this business, I sit in the HR function or people function. I've sat in the operations and health and safety function. So there's always challenges with budgets in any organisation, but I think it comes down to where are we adding value, where can we demonstrate that value, and how can we, to reinforce the point before, how can we recognise and demonstrate to people that investing in learning at this point and early on in the process is much more effective. And I think in my world, that historically, or for the last 15 years probably, has been safety orientated, the cost of incidents, the cost of something going wrong is astronomical, and it's human, it's financial, it's a whole range of things, but it's making sure that we can demonstrate the value of what we're doing. So around the budget, it's really understanding that value. And then thirdly, I made a point, and I had a long conversation with Donald Taylor from Learning Tech around this one. COVID was something none of us saw coming. I think leading into COVID, I was in a very lucky position, if that's the right word, but I'd been working in BP, where in a design team where we were really pushing the boundaries on digital and what we could present, and we put various programs together. We'd got to the point where we were strongly using video, we had editing facilities, we were using AI within some of our systems, etc. So we're in a really good position, but we'd gone through this process of convincing the business and showing what we could do, etc. When COVID hit, it put everybody in that position where they needed to demonstrate or be able to deliver digitally. I think part of the problem that COVID created was this knee-jerk reaction where we created a lot of e-learning and we created instructor-led training, through Teams, etc. And it wasn't particularly good quality. A lot of the people that were putting it together literally just took a classroom course and did it on video. There was a lot of e-learning that was almost like so templated, it just didn't land the messages. And I think what we're seeing now, and definitely in the business I'm seeing, is we're now trying to wind that back a little bit. But part of the problem is the naysayers around going digital before COVID now had ammunition to say we told you it wouldn't work, because in a lot of cases it didn't. So although COVID had this massive drive towards digital, I am sure it was always to the quality and the expectation that we should have done. And I think it always frustrates me when people think of digital as e-learning. Digital can be so much more than e-learning. It can be so engaging, can be so informative. But if all we do is look at digital as e-learning, we've put it in a box and we've fixed it. And I don't think that particularly, has done digital a lot of good over the years. So I think that's one of the challenges that now we've got to unwind a little bit and really demonstrate to people what digital can add to the solution that we're looking for.
Thank you for explaining that. Though we would like to also know about the current trends or emerging issues that you observe or anticipate in digital transformation and workplace learning in the UK.
Yeah, no problem. So trends and emerging issues. Well, they're probably not that emerging. They've probably been around for a while. But what are we starting to see now? Good use of data. Coming into this role, I've been in this role nearly coming up to 3 years in March, I think. One of the first things we did was really try to get a grip of data. How can data help us make decisions? Where can we see trends? Where can we take this to the business and say, you've got this many people coming out of compliance. How does this work with your business operations? And being able to show that, demonstrate that, is really, really valuable. And it allows you to get into some really good conversations about what the needs of the business are. So the trends are, we're starting to see that better data. Again, I've seen data used in relation to delivering training to cohorts. We're starting to use AI technology, and we're really starting to understand the impact of the training and understand whether it is improving people's knowledge and understanding through the language they're using. I think learning needs to be closer to where, closer to the point of use, learning in the flow of work, etc. I think we need to start looking at really considering, if we're delivering learning digitally or face-to-face, how much people actually take away from that experience, how much actually lands and they're going to apply, and how much of that actually could we do in a different way. Even things like prompt cards or nudges. I mentioned about the QR codes. That's literally nudging people on a regular basis. I know our side around customer service, they're now using products that are constantly nudging, day to day, nudging the people on the telephones, answering customer service calls, challenging their knowledge, giving them little bits of information as and when they need it. We're then looking at how we can roll that out to the teams out in the field, where they're making decisions day to day that are, we're closing roads, etc. What's the implications, and are we always making the right decisions, and are there little nudges that we could be giving people at the point of use? So I think we're starting to see those trends of how learning can actually be at the point of use. A product that or a program we did at BP, we did something around leading in operations, and I think it was quite groundbreaking around getting away from course delivery, and it was really putting a program together. And they did this where I've seen this with a few programs around human factors, leading in operations, etc., where we don't take a course, you look at the whole process. You look at actually understanding the people that you're taking through the learning, helping them understand the importance of what they do and the implications. And instead of, for example, looking at certain training as a solution, you embed that into things like safety leadership or risk management or future thinking. And then you take tools like leadership and management tools, etc., and you build them into those solutions so people see how they can apply the tools in the different environments. I referred earlier to being a joiner many moons ago, and I think some of the things I've done as I reflect, I often talk about a toolbox. So, you know, I've gone through training around continuous improvement, leadership and management, design thinking, more recently agile. And I look at that, and maybe the simplicity of being a joiner doesn't make me do it, but they're all tools in the toolbox. So I have these tools available to me now. But like any tradesperson, the skill is in the tradesperson knowing which tools to use when. And I think as we progress, we're getting to that point where we can give tools to people, but sometimes we just got to give them a bit of a guidance of understanding and practicing and understanding when to use these tools. And that's when we have a real impact, that people can take these tools and apply them in the right situations. Often, you know, in the safety world, it was almost instructive. The problem with that is people don't often pick that up and take it to a different environment and apply the same context. I think understanding how to use tools, coaching and mentoring in that support. So in that particular tool I talked about, we had people could go on and do the learning, really good, but then there was questions, and they would input their answers to the questions as a cohort. All their fellow team members could see what they were doing, could see the questions and reply to them. We built coaches, we had coaches in those conversations. So as well as a program to access your learning, it was also an element of social learning. And on the back of that social learning, AI was helping us tell us where they were more engaged to help the coaches and the mentors step in and support where it was needed. So really better use of programs, and all the digital solutions and all the solutions come together to really make an impact, rather than piecemeal throw things at it and hopefully all the pieces will come together. So I think they're the emerging things that we're starting to see, and where digital can really support in that.
Enlightening indeed. For any change or evolution, Graham, skills are most crucial resource, right? So what are the skills or competencies that you need to develop or enhance to cope with the future of digital transformation and workplace learning?
Yeah. So I reflected on this, and I reflected on the team I manage now, and what we've been doing over the last 2 or 3 years to try and get that team more effective, because if they're more effective, we're more effective. So one of the first things we did was learning consultancy, really understanding learning needs analysis, really understanding performance consultancy, being able to use those tools, engage with people in the business, really sort of, you know, I think a reflection of it is the learning consultants I have in the business are constantly getting asked to go to meetings. They're constantly being asked to go in conversations. And really, the earlier in the process they're being asked, the more successful we are. And I think the business is starting to see that. So that real learning consultancy, understanding the business needs is one key element of skills required in L&D. I think the other one is agile thinking. I'm a big advocate of agile. I think, you know, it doesn't necessarily need to be agile out of the box, but that concept of, you know, not necessarily always thinking we have to start, you know, and we've got this gold-plated solution in the end. Let's build in iterations. Let's test regularly. Let's put it in front of the stakeholders and get them engaged early. It shares the experience. People get to build and work with you. And I think one of the things we found when we used agile is, historically, stakeholders, we would build products for them. When we started to use agile, we built products with them. We identified issues much earlier on in the process. So we weren't building, you know, adding value to something that was already wrong. We identified really at the early stages where it was wrong and corrected it. And we often found that we didn't get to the gold-plated end because we found that wasn't what they needed. At a certain iteration, people say, well, actually, this does everything we need it to do. So we were always aiming for that. We moved away from alpha beta testing, and it always makes me laugh because I always think there's alpha beta, beta beta again. We're constantly doing these iterations at the end where agile thinking helps you build that in. You test regularly. You don't get precious about your ideas. You work as a development team, including the stakeholders, including the product owners, and you build the right solution. And then the benefit is it gets recognition, it works, it supports the need, and you've not got this thing where you've built something and actually nobody's using it, which, you know, for any L&D function isn't where you want to be. And finally, the third part I've put is open-minded, really. I think coming into a company that was quite heavily face-to-face training, we've started to work with our trainers and people in the business and say, well, yeah, okay, so you're a trainer, you've got technical knowledge or in these areas, but what are your more transferable skills? And we've now got trainers that are coaching and mentoring in the field. You know, these are transferable skills. We can actually take the learning out to the people where they are, so we can actually see their environment. So, for example, you know, we have a rig set up for working at heights, but one of our working at heights trainers has been out to one of the sites and he's been training using one of the cooling towers and getting the guys on the sites on the cooling towers doing working at height rescues, etc., in their environment, which they loved. It really brought it home. They were able to ask questions in their environment. So it's really that, where are the transferable skills? If I've got a trainer, I've got a mentor, our trainers are now reflected as product owners. So they work with the stakeholders to bring all the technical content when we're looking at either adapting things, updating, etc. There's a brilliant TED talk by a lady called Lisa Lyons, and she talks about, you know, in the current world, is it acceptable that you train up in one career and that's it? And it's very rarely now. I think if I reflect myself, I've probably had 3 or 4 different types of career. So what becomes more important are those transferable skills. And I think one of the things we need to do as L&D people is be open-minded to say, what are our transferable skills and those of our customers, and where does that offer the opportunity for us or them to move into different parts of the business and support the business using those skills. Okay.
Right, surely. It's an absolute valuable information. Though I'm quite interested to know that you have a lot of experience in learning and development, but you also have a passion for open water swimming and endurance swims. How do you balance these 2 passions?
Yeah, good question. I've always, especially when I worked for myself, I went through a period where I was trying to link sport and business. And it's an interesting correlation, because if I've mentioned about continuous improvement, if you look in sports science is their real equivalent to continuous improvement. How do you do things more efficiently, etc. Sports psychology can relate to EQ and this concept of how people are thinking and what impact does that have. And there's various, you know, there's a book called What Will Make the Boat Go Faster, and it talks a lot about practice. So it's Ben Hunt Davis, and he was an Olympic rower when Great Britain won gold in 2000, I think it was. And he's now works in organisations and business as a consultant, and he says it's quite bizarre that in a sports world, 80 to 90% of what you do is practice, and 10 to 20% is perform. And even at that, they don't expect them to perform at 100% all the time, because they'll be building up to an Olympics or a World Championships, etc. If I then relate that back to our world, how much time do we actually give people to practice? And I think that's where, you know, the separation of digital, and this is where it helps in that if we can get them doing the core stuff before they come to the business, before they come to the training can be very much about practice. Now, my experience, you know, again, another correlation, between sport and business. There's not many sports only require one person. I do solo swims, and I've done various swims. As a solo swimmer, you still require a team around you. You will not get from England to France swimming if you decide to go on your own. It won't work. You need a boat of people that are skilled and knowledgeable. You need somebody to help you feed who knows when to feed you and support you. Your training requires physios and nutritionists, etc. So it's always, it's very rarely an individual effort. It might be classed as a solo. So really that concept of teamwork and that relates to the business. How do I fit it in? Well, I've always worked on the basis healthy body, healthy mind. I get more frustrated if I've got an injury and I'm not doing activity, and I find that does frustrate me at work, and I don't feel as fresh and energized at work. And I suppose from how do I fit it all in? Swimming's an interesting sport. When you're in the lake, it's not the most social of sports. So if I'm training for 3 or 4 or 5 hours swimming, it's a lot of thinking time. So a lot of that thinking time is spent on what's going on at work that day, or reflection. So it gives you an awful lot of reflection time, which is beneficial.
You have actually intrigued me to try the sport more passionately. With stuff, yes.
Sorry, no, I was going to say, I just think that it's an interesting link between any sports person that really, really pushes the boundaries, etc., and business. There's a real correlation there, and it's something that, interests me a lot.
Understandable. With such abundance of information, we have reached to the end of this webinar. However, we have few inquisitive minds in our audience, so now let's take questions from them. So one question I do have here is, what role can the government play in supporting the adoption of digital transformation in workplace learning in the UK?
Yeah, so in previous roles, I have got involved in sort of government funding, which was quite advantageous in that through apprenticeships and things like that, we were able to pull in funding. I mentioned earlier on, I was a tradesperson, so I'm a big advocate of apprenticeships. I think they've gone through various phases, but I think what's provided now is quite beneficial. In relation to the value of apprenticeships and trades for the business, when I was at BP on a chemical plant, we had a defined model that actually we brought into engineering roles, so quite senior roles. We would bring graduates in a graduate program, but we would also bring apprenticeships through. So right at the point when we were going into schools and talking to schools about opportunities to work in the chemical plant, we would be saying, well, you could come and do a trade. You could be a mechanic, electrician, ICA, various roles within the trades. But then the opportunity then is, once you've done the trade, is to progress and do work-based learning. So you would do your degree, your master's, and then come into the engineering team through the work-based route. What we found as a business was that we had a very, very balanced engineering team. We had a very academic view coming into the business, but we also had people in the business that had, by that time, 10 to 12, 13 years worth of experience of the site, of working in those environments. They knew what it meant to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go out onto a wet site to put something right. And that combination of that academic understanding of what's out there in the wider world and that experience of this site gave us a really strong engineering team. So I think more, the apprenticeships can be really, really useful, and the way they're funded and structured now is good. One of the challenges we're having, and what more maybe the government could do, is maybe expand that a little bit. So there's very strict, requirements around the apprenticeships and what qualifies you for an apprenticeship. We tend to use those standards. We'll use an apprenticeship standard for our competencies, but then we'll be bringing it into the business, and maybe somebody doesn't qualify for an apprenticeship because of their level of experience, but there might be a gap that could be fulfilled with some of the learning from the apprenticeship. And we find this a lot in mechanical more than anywhere else. But, you know, mechanical learning, etc. I think if we could almost break down the apprenticeships and be able to fund modules or be able to get those modules, and it would be really beneficial to industry as a whole. And I think then what you're seeing is it's not just about new people coming in, it's really about also developing the people we've got in the business. And it may not be the whole apprenticeship, but broken down into component parts from our perspective would be really useful. And the government's just got to talk to industry. I think they have done a much better job in the last 5 or 6 years than the previous, in that, you know, I remember when my son was at school, I think the careers conversations were 1 hour 50 minutes about going to university and getting a degree, and the last 5 minutes before they wrapped up was about if you want to go and do a trade. I think that's changing slightly now. I think we're getting to a point where people realise they can work and learn. And I think that also helps the thing of it's ongoing learning. I think if you've worked and learned, you carry on doing that through your working life as well. So I think there's lots of opportunity to really make the most out of the apprenticeships. We think we have about 250, 300 people currently on apprenticeships. It does require time. I've got 3 of my team, well, 2 have just finished an apprenticeship in L&D level 5 qualification, and I've got another one on one at the moment. So yeah, really beneficial. It would just, for me, I think it'd be even more beneficial if we could break it down into smaller parts that we could utilise.
That was wonderfully laid. Thank you so much. So I have another question here from the audience. As I am HR in new company and don't have a good idea how to get this digital effectively, what is your suggestion for me?
Sorry, just say that, read that again, sorry.
Sure. As I am HR in new company and don't have a good idea how to get this digital effectively, what is your suggestion for me?
Okay, so it's going to be an interesting one. I think it comes down to if you're starting from scratch and there is nothing there, it's really making sure that what you do is value added. So don't go too big. Start with something really simple. What's going to affect a number of people? One thing we use digital quite successfully for is really around what we would call mandatory training, but 5, 6, 7 modules that everybody has to do that enlightens you about the values, the objectives of the business, the vision of the business, and it really sets everybody up in the business with the same framework of this is what the business is about, these are our values and these are our behaviours, and then they can be reinforced and strengthened in conversations. We have values moments at the beginning of every meeting where against our values somebody refers to, you know, where somebody's exceeded that or where there's been a challenge to it. So maybe look at, you know, if you are going to invest in some sort of digital solution, look at where you can have most impact and where it will add most value, and then build on that. Because, you know, the worst thing you can do is actually provide something that has no impact whatsoever, because again, it's almost like a negative. All those naysayers around digital, well, we told you it wouldn't work. So really work with the business, work with the stakeholders and understand what it is they're trying to solve, and then look at what's going to have the, you know, most effectiveness across the business and most value to you for the money you're going to spend to do it.
All right, thank you. And then we have questions incoming. Another one is, I am currently taking a course on new technologies. So will this give me a better understanding when I join the company after completing?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. So yeah, I mean, what new technologies are out there? We need people to come in. You know, I used Agile, and I'd used DevOps in another company, which is an Agile planning tool. I had somebody in my team that just took to it. I sort of positioned it and look, this is a tool. It's there to help us. Let's give it 2 or 3 months. And let's test it, let's use it. And if it doesn't work and it's just creating work for people, let's stop using it. So if it's not adding value, we're not going to do it. Interestingly, a year and a half in, everybody's, or the team are all using it. I actually asked the question last week of what would happen if we took this away. Well, I nearly got my head bitten off. So they're not parting with it. It's useful. So anybody, the particular individual that's got this set up and making it work and making it absolutely sing has added so much value. So again, if you've got an understanding of new technologies, share that with the business. But as you know, it's almost the answer to everything is really look for an opportunity where it's going to add value, and then you will find it'll land in the company because people will want to use it, not we're using this because we want to implement this. So really identify where there's value. Yes, absolutely. I think if you've got skills on what the new technologies are and how we can use them, it's only going to add value to the business.
Thank you. That's understandable. Another question we have. I have experience of 6 years in industrial relations and as agile enthusiast. I want to know what are the most important things to think about when developing and implementing a digital learning strategy in the UK.
Okay, so I think the digital transformation strategy has got to be in line and supporting the bigger business picture. So it can't be standalone. You've got to really get a grasp of the needs of the business, the drive of the business, the values, the vision of the business, and then identify where digital can support that and digital can really make an impact on that. So I think from a strategy perspective, I think you mentioned sort of behavioural in there. From a, we work very much in a competency compliance based world. Behavioural is so important. It's making sure we've got the right behaviours in the environment to make sure they're making the right decision. And digital can support that. There's a whole raft of things that digital can add to that, whether it's nudging, whether it's giving people access to text and books, etc., that they can get access to through audio books. There's a whole raft of solutions, but don't try and embed it or imply it. Try and look for somewhere where it offers the solution. So really understand what the business are trying to do and be really, really clear of where digital can support that and help. And then if you apply it into that environment and measure it and feed it back, and don't get fixed in that you expect it to be right first time. So by engaging people in the process, they're more likely to take some ownership and help you find the right solution. But then you can really step back and say, well, look, this was the route the business wanted to go. This is where digital transformation supported in that. And I think that's where, from a strategy perspective, you're going to get, again, most value in that you're aligning it to what the business is trying to do, not just implement digital transformation.
All right, thank you. Due to time constraint, I think this will be the last question we'll be able to take. Have you considered educating employees towards a system, thinking as a wide concentrate of focus towards interconnections, interactions between the various business areas, such that learners would benefit from having a high-level schematic as to their involvement, role in the organizational hierarchy?
Yeah, so we're working on a big project at the moment that has two elements to it. One is competence certification. So we've been, probably for the best part of 2 years, been building up competence frameworks for roles. And a lot of that is around compliance and what's required in that particular role. And certifications, so that, as we mentioned earlier, it's a bit of the curate and preference to create. So we can take a certificate in one role and apply it to another role, but they're not all the same certificates. But the other part to that is career frameworks. So part of career frameworks is saying what are the transferable skills you've got in these roles, identifying the skills of planning, programming, problem solving, a whole raft of transferable skills, and then giving people visibility of their progression route within their skills. So I mentioned earlier, if we've got mechanical technicians who are working on water production plants, what's their route to actually then becoming an engineer? and where is that route in the business, and what are their options, and what are their pathways and routes. But also, if you've got these transferable skills of you've got planning and programming and you're working on the water production site, where is the roles in the business that would use those skills? So very much starting to the career path piece is as much around transferable skills as specific technical skills. And it's just an increasing need in the business. We often skirt around that and we list all the things we want them to do, and it puts people in a box. But very rarely will those skills only be applicable to that role. It's transferring them into different. I mentioned CI. I was a CI facilitator. I used to train CI. As a manager, do I use those skills every day? Absolutely every day I use those skills. I'm not an agile, I'm not a CI person now, but I'm using those skills all the time. And I think it's understanding what you need in your toolbox, and then where those tools can be used in different places. And that's the real skill, is understanding how you can use them, not necessarily in the environment you're in now, but in other environments. That's a real challenge, and that real growth mindset that people have got to engage in.
Thank you, Graham. It was a wonderful and quite educating to have you here with us. Dear viewers, for any further query and question, kindly mail us at info@primedtalent.com. My apologies to all those whose questions I couldn't address due to time constraint. Nevertheless, please write to us at info@primedtalent.com and we shall do the needful. Also, you can visit our website www.primedtalent.com. Thank you and have a great day ahead. Thank you so much for being here. We all appreciate your presence here. Thank you, Graham.
No problem. Thank you. Thanks, Akita.